My name is Shantell Martin, and I'm the host of What's the Point? This is a conversation series dedicated to exploring why artists create art and the forces that influence us. Join me as I sit down with artists and friends to talk about their reasons for doing what they do and why they continue to create.
For me, the point of art is creating your own language.
A lot of times when I shoot, I think of how's this going to look in 10 years?
I don't really think about the individual colors as much as I think about how they play off of each other.
Oh, the point is the journey.
And I start to get a sense of what the painting is going to be like.
Because the point of art could simply be just to make it.
It's my pleasure to introduce today's guest, Allison Hueman. Allison is a dynamic artist who creates paintings, murals, and super large-scale installations. She's known for her abstract images that are rich and very vivid in color. She draws from different movements such as abstract expressionism and has worked with major brands like Adobe and Jordan, as well as many more. She has had numerous solo group exhibitions and installations. Please welcome Allison. Allison, it's so nice to have you here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And I'm so excited to meet you in person finally.
It's always fun, having, I'd say, a friend, an artist friend that's out there in the world that you've not met in person. And so today's the day for us. And so you came in from the Bay Area?
I did, yeah. So I'm usually out here like once a month. I lived in LA for a little over a decade. And like one of my best friends is still out here, and I'm still working with clients out here. So I do try to just make it out, once a month and just like be in LA and yeah.
And that's an easy flight as well. It's just like an hour.
Yeah. So it's only an hour, and a lot of the times I really just fly in for the day and then I fly home. I have 2 daughters, so yeah.
So you don't want to be away from them.
Yeah.
That's a much better trip than going to New York, because I lived in New York for 15 years. And so I have that same relationship, but with New York. But New York
you can't just quickly.
It's a 3.5 hour flight there and sometimes a 6 hour flight back, depending on tailwinds and stuff. So it's a little bit tough that way. How old are your kids?
5 and 2.
5 and 2. Are they drawing?
Yes. The older one, Sophie, it's so crazy. Like the older she gets, the more she reminds me of me. And yeah, she just draws like crazy. Like, she's just so in the zone anytime she's like making anything, and it's really cool to watch.
And are you encouraging them to make and to create?
Yeah, I mean, she was doing it all on her own. I think it was just she was picking it up at daycare, but yeah, anytime we just get her like craft supplies, she'll just kind of stay in a corner and just like go for it. And right now she's learning how to write. She's in kindergarten. So now she's writing her own stories and stuff, and it's so cool.
And growing up, did you have siblings? Yeah.
So I have a younger brother. He's 3 years younger than me, and then also an older half brother. He passed away though, when he was 21 and I was 13 years old.
Were you together like growing up? Were you all together?
So I would never call him like my half brother, but yeah.
I'm the same. I have a bunch of siblings, which I would never call my half because we like grew up together. Did you grow up like making and creating together?
Yeah, my younger brother. So actually, my younger brother works with me.
Oh wow,
a lot. Yeah, for the last few years, he's been doing a lot of his own thing because he does like cabinetry and woodworking and fabrication. But when I was doing a lot of murals, he was traveling with me everywhere and painting, and anything I have that I need built, whether it's crates or like an installation, like we figure out together how we're going to make it. And sometimes I'll see something on Pinterest that I want for the studio, and I'll just be like, can you make this for me? And
I love that. I love that. Because, crates especially, that's not easy to come across or make, and it's deceiving because you just think, you make a painting and you pull it in a big crate or a box. But those things cost a lot of money and time and attention to make.
Yeah.
So it's nice that you have that resource.
Yeah. So, it's so funny too because I had just moved back to the Bay. This was, I think, in like 2014, and I was working on a solo show. And I had attempted to do my own like woodworking, and I was so amateur. And at the time, I didn't know that he already had all these skills that he had learned in like some woodworking shop in college. And so he was helping me to install the show. And I had found out while we were already installing the show that he knew how to do all of this already. And I was like, wait, so you're going to let me just embarrass myself? So after that, I was just like, okay, well, now we're a team.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to paint with me. You're going to build
if you like it or not. Yeah.
Yeah. I was very much like older sister, like, all right, you come with me.
Yeah. And then so if we backtrack a little bit, so tell us, where were you born? Where did you grow up?
Yeah, I grew up in the Bay Area, in a city called Daly City. And I grew up a little outside of Oakland. So like Fremont, Hayward area. So I was always outside of like Oakland and San Francisco. Like I always saw those two cities as like the coolest places ever. And I grew up in a very like middle class Filipino American Catholic upbringing, going to church every Sunday. I went to Catholic school from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. Yeah, that's how I grew up. And I'm pretty sure my first just exposure to arts was through the church. I was like singing in choir, and I would sometimes lead the responsorial psalm. I would go up there by myself and lead in the responses and be part of the youth choir and stuff like that. So church was like very much part of my life. Like going to school and seeing a lot of like the religious paintings and stuff like that and the sculptures. I'm pretty sure that's why it's part of like my visual language, like my DNA, whether or not I can help it, because it's just really what I grew up looking at, the statues, and it's all very dramatic. And they all used to scare me.
Wow. And so growing up, going to the church and Catholic school, was there a sense of community growing up? Do you feel like you knew your neighbors and you kind of had an extended community outside of your family?
Yeah. I wouldn't say neighbors. So I actually lived 30 minutes away from where we went to church and school. But just being part of the church and seeing the same people and all that. Yeah, there was a community, for better or worse, because I ended up being in the same class with the same people, like 30 people from kindergarten all the way to high school. So as soon as I could leave, I went straight to LA.
What's that like?
It was a lot. Yeah, because anything that would happen was just very dramatic, and I would find myself on the receiving end of like gossip and rumors and stuff like that. And then it's hard to escape because you're just in the same class with the same people for so long.
Yeah. Did you keep in touch with any of them?
No.
No. Okay. There you go.
Well, maybe. Actually, I married my high school sweetheart.
There you go. So something good came out of high school.
Yeah. Well, we actually didn't even connect until the very last year of high school.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you say the best till the last
yes.
year.
Uh-huh.
I've been obsessed with choirs for a while. And I love that you were in a choir kind of growing up. What was that experience like, singing and leading choir? Because there's something really interesting about, I think artists using their voice kind of visually, but then literally using their voice. And, at a young age, you were able to use your voice.
Yeah, I wasn't in choir for too long, but singing has always been, or just being musical and just finding different ways to express myself aside from visual art has always been a big part of like expression for me. And so even though I was in choir for maybe like 2 years, me and my cousins, when we were like 11 to 13 years old, we like formed a girl group. And then at one point I was in an actual girl group, like an LA formed producer, like curated girl group. And oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm even saying that out loud. That's so
things could have gone in a much different interjection. Yeah.
And then I was in dance from kindergarten through college, and there was like tons of other ways that I was finding, to express myself. And I was also like into acting and writing and stuff like that.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Have you ever thought about, because your work feels so ethereal, it has such a presence to it. Have you ever thought about bringing sound or voice into the work?
Yeah, so I have actually. A few years ago, I created an immersive like experience. During the pandemic, like immersive experiences were like the thing. And I had actually been very much into immersive experiences. It sounds so lame for me to say it like this, but I was into them before they were.
Yeah, before they were hip.
Before they were hip, because I was always into those ride simulators, like at like the Star Wars thing at Disneyland. Anything that sort of transported you to another place, like using visuals and sound and like trying to create like a full immersive experience. Those kinds of like the IMAX movies and stuff. As a kid growing up, that really like blew my mind. And I remember I went to Mocha over here in like, I think it was maybe 2010. I can't remember, but it was a long time ago. But I think I might have still been in college. And the show was called Ecstasy. And it was a collection of art and experiences. And it was the first time I had really experienced an immersive experience. And the theme of it was, I think, about like being under the influence, whatever that may be. So, of course, a lot of artists were exploring being under the influence of drugs and other substances. So I remember there was like the Rain Room, and I forgot what the name of the artist, but there was like strobe lights and rain falling down, and being in that room and seeing the raindrops suspended and looking like diamonds blew my mind. And I knew I wanted to create something like that. And so, sorry, I just went on a whole tangent.
No.
But yeah, so I had been inspired by these immersive experiences growing up. And then once COVID came around, and these things like the Van Gogh experience and Picasso and Frida Kahlo and basically all these dead people, their work was being rehashed and without their consent, obviously. And I remember I bought VIP tickets to that Van Gogh experience on 420. And I was like, I'm going to have an experience. And just to find out that it felt like I was looking at giant screensavers on walls, and I was very let down. I felt very much ripped off. And I was like, I want to make something that's speaking to the moment right now. And so I created my exhibit, which is called Homebody. And I collaborated with all these other artists, from projection designers to sound designers to musicians. And we created multiple rooms of experiences that spoke to the basically what was going on psychologically in our collective psyche during the pandemic. And so like the start of the experience starts in what is basically a living room because we're stuck at home. And then you leave the living room through the fireplace. We go through the fire, and now you're in this tunnel. And so like everything was designed to really just speak to the moment, but also like transport people. And so I knew that I had to really like consider everything from the lighting to the sound. My husband actually created music for one of the rooms, which was basically supposed to be like one giant Zoom meeting. So it was these 10 screens of faces, and they were actually AI portraits, and they would fade between their faces to like ancient sculptures because I wanted to show how like human identity has shifted through time. And then especially through COVID, now the way that we're experiencing each other is over Wi-Fi, basically, and so that room was about, just everyone like coming together digitally, but still being there together. Yeah, so my husband created like some beautiful, just like ambient music for that room. And it ended up being like a touching experience for people, I think, because when we opened that show, it was right after the California restrictions had been lifted. So for a lot of people, this was the first time they were coming together in a space. And when they saw the pictures of these faces, people, I think, maybe they didn't realize that the people weren't real. And I think they thought it was a memorial.
Oh,
So it was weird, like the context and the timing and the music. And so people were getting pretty emotional about it. And I was like, wow, like, and kind of insane to have this effect on people just because of the way that all of these elements came together in one place, you know?
that's an interesting point about the faces because, you know, there's almost this kind of mourning of loss for people who have never existed.
Exactly,
You know,
yeah.
there's something really profound mixed up within that. And so that was on for a duration. Were you able to capture it in a way where, you know, later on it could live somewhere else or be a virtual space or be, you know, something that people could revisit?
Yeah. So the total experience was 5 rooms. So one of those rooms, which was titled Isolation, I managed to bring that down to Tampa for some time. So that was cool. And then I think we're working on taking that FaceTime Zoom room down to Huntington Beach later this year, hopefully.
Okay, fantastic.
So it's nice that, you know, hopefully people can get to experience it, you know, after the show's long over. But after that, I've just been wanting to do more of the big, large-scale, immersive multimedia type of things because, you know, painting has always been like my first love just because it feels so good for me to do it, like physically. After that show, I realized like there's only so much you can do with a painting. But like sonically, when you're bringing together visuals and sound and controlling the way people experience it in that way, like to bring an emotion out of people. Yeah. I mean, I know people have cried at Rothko's. Apparently, I've never cried at a painting. You know, I want to be able to create more like, experiences like that can really touch people in that way.
I love that you've also expanded it into a family business. You know, that your husband's involved making music. And, you know, the paintings, you know, you said you have a love for paintings and then, you know, kind of, you mentioned Rothko as well. You know, I think there is such a vividness within the colors that you use and a spectrum that works so well together. And, you know, color is something that I shy away from because, you know, I feel like I don't have that part of the brain that can bring these colors together into a place where they feel peaceful and magical and complementary. And you have that. Where do you think that comes from?
Well, it's so funny because as you said that, like you said you shy away from it. Like, are you afraid of it? Like, are you afraid to mess
I think when I start using colors, firstly, I've never enjoyed mixing colors. Like I've never enjoyed creating new palettes. If I use color, I want to use it right out of a box, and I want to use that blue, that bright red. And you know, there's a sense that I just don't want to mix them or change them. If I use colors, I like it, but I also prefer to use black and white because then the color is in my imagination versus being right in front of me.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because as you were saying that, I was reminded of, there was a time when I was afraid of color. Back when I was maybe 18, 19 and still figuring out just how to make art, I think I kind of was leaning more towards drawing first, drawing in graphite and black and white, and then trying to figure out later how to do color because I think I was very much afraid of color. And I do think it's around the time maybe when I started spray painting is when I started to really experiment because with spray paint, something beautiful happens that I noticed when you're just like misting a certain place, like a portion of a painting, and then you mist it. And depending on your can control and how far you are away from the canvas and stuff like that, you get these different shades and these unexpected combinations. And so my process is I'm very much an action painter when I first started painting. I never start with a plan. And I think because of that, I am so shy about messing it up. So I'm just like, F it, I'm just going to just go for it. And so I like to paint fast and hard. And so my favorite is using water-based spray paints because with water-based paints, you can actually cut into it with a wet brush. And then it starts to just like mix together like regular acrylic paintings, and you get a lot of these unexpected, just like color combinations and stuff. And yeah, because I think if I think about it too much, it's just not fun for me, and it's not enjoyable, and I get really stuck on, well, it's supposed to look like this, or this is how I was imagining it in my head. So the way I like to work is I just I just kind of go for it and just like let it all out. And then I like to let the piece emerge from, if it ends up being muddy or ugly, all you do is just add more.
Yeah.
And then until it works, So
I love the term action painter. Yeah. I feel like I'm an action artist too. I just want to go. It's like you feel like you're a dancer or a runner.
Right, yeah.
You're just letting it unfold.
Mm-hmm.
And, as you said, I think when you have too much time to think about things,
Mm-hmm.
then you have time to think about what you might not do versus what you're going to do naturally in that moment, in that time, in that space, which I think is quite beautiful. You said you used kind of water-based spray paints. What type of brands are those?
Montana,
Okay.
MTN, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because someone who was working at their distributor down here in LA, he actually introduced, I posted about it yesterday actually. I said 10 years ago, I was introduced to these paints. Yeah, because he was just like, oh, we got this new paint. Like I had never seen, I don't think anyone was making anything like this before. And he was just like, yeah, just try it out and see how you like it. And I feel like most people wouldn't like it because it doesn't act. I don't know have you ever spray painted?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, and like with these water-based, the particles are a lot thicker. They run a little more, but with what I like to do, which is like get a lot of water in there and make it really messy, it's exactly what I wanted. And so I love cutting to it with like a wet brush or like a rag and just making something crazy and then letting the piece build from there.
So for those who aren't familiar with your work, how would you describe, kind of your painting?
It's kind of a combination of a lot of things because I feel like I have so many just like influences in general. Like I really like just being spontaneous, abstract expressionism and stuff, and really just getting into the materiality of the canvas, the paint that I'm working with, and just having it be all about that for a moment. And then when it's dry, then I start to meditate on what it is. And sometimes the image presents itself. It feels like I'm like carving it out, like I'm a archaeologist like digging this image out. And so it's kind of a combination of this freestyle, abstract thing with like figures occasionally. And the figures are usually very fragmented. I do faces sometimes, but I tend not to. I don't know why.
They creep up in there sometimes.
Yeah. Like if I get commissioned to do a portrait, then I'll do a face. But usually when I'm portraying people, they're very much like fragmented. And so you can't really, because I'm not really trying to paint a particular person.
Yeah. So after high school, did you end up going to an art school or where did you end up after that?
So I went to UCLA.
Okay.
That's actually how I ended up in LA. And I was studying design media arts. And I was trying to, I don't know, there's a bunch of things I wanted to do because I've always been into digital media. My dad is a computer engineer who works in Silicon Valley. So we were always like up to date with all our tech and stuff. And I got like early copies of Photoshop as a kid. And so I knew that I wanted to pursue something that was more like a real job. I didn't know anyone who was an artist. So I just felt like, okay, well, I need to go to a real college. But like I want to do something creative. And UCLA was, first it's UCLA. So of course I wanted to go to a place like UCLA, but also I think it's the only UC that offered the design media arts program. So I thought, well, if I'm in LA, like maybe I can go into Hollywood and do motion graphics or special effects. Maybe I can get into advertising. And what I ended up doing was starting a design branding studio while I was in college. So I ended up doing like a bunch of graphic design, web design, logos, all sorts of stuff like that while I was still a student.
What was the name of your studio?
circle.creative.
Circle.creative.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That sounds like fun. I feel like sometimes the most successful students are the ones that are building companies at the same time as being a student. Like, how did you find that workload and everything?
It was tough. So I was discovering firsthand how to be a freelancer. I feel like I have trouble working for other people. And I'm sure a lot of artists will say that. I would get jobs and then secretly work on my own stuff while I'd be working for someone else and trying to juggle all of that. And also, yeah, I feel like it took a good 10 years of figuring out how to work with clients, how to, because no one teaches you that stuff, you know? So it was tough. And now finally, I feel like I've got it down.
Yeah.
But for a long time. And also, when I graduated, we were in the middle of like the recession. I graduated in 2008. So I couldn't get a job if I tried. And I tried. I tried really hard. And so by default, I had to just be a freelancer and then try to figure it out.
Yeah. And so was there a moment where you thought, okay, the studio's been great, but I'm going to close this? And
well, the studio was not great.
Okay, the studio had its chance, yeah.
Yeah, it was, especially because it's not what I truly wanted to do.
Yeah.
And being in LA, so I was actually, through college, I was freelancing, but I was also showing in group shows around LA in galleries. And I was getting very much lost in these gigantic group shows that had like 40 different artists, and no one really, I mean, it just, my work didn't stand out. And, but being in that scene and being around artists and seeing people who were doing it full time, and also being part of like, because now I was like around the graffiti and street art scene, I'm seeing women that are on like all of these LA walls. I'm just like, oh, wow. You know, like I think being closer to it in proximity and seeing that this was a possibility really gave me that itch to pursue that. So while I was like being a freelancer and really not doing a great job at it, and I was juggling like so many projects, and also I was in like a pretty terrible relationship at the time. So trying to juggle all of these things was just a lot. And so eventually I broke up with that guy and I finished my projects. And, you know, now I was part of the art scene down here. So I was asking around like, hey, do you have a wall? Can I come paint with you? I was like offering to assist with people. And that really was just kind of my, you know, entryway into doing murals. But yeah, it's actually around that time, that's when I adopted my name Hueman, because I felt very much like a robot being a freelancer behind a computer. And so the first time I signed my first LA mural, I signed Hueman just because it felt natural. I felt like myself.
What was that mural?
It was around the corner from here. It's not around anymore, but it's in Little Tokyo in the back parking lot. And I painted a really bad elephant. And it was the hardest thing I had ever done. And it was really hot and I was sweating and I was like, oh my God, like, I don't know if I'm cut out for murals. Because, you know, murals are very, you know, taxing. But I love just being outside and I love being around people and feeling like I was part of a community because, you know, I was hanging out, I was talking to people versus being behind my desk at home, behind a computer, feeling very isolated. I realized I very much like to be around people, even though I feel like I'm a extroverted introvert. I like to be around, but then I don't. I want to be able to like go back into my shell, but
I can relate to that.
Yeah.
I think there's something really fun about, you know, if that wall still exists, that where you did your first mural, it's still there, you know, it's behind
beneath all of it.
Yeah, and there's something really nice about your DNA, your hand, that time period. It just becomes a part of this collection of the history of like the architecture of that space. Because I think a lot of the work that I've done, especially early on, it's gone, you know, like it got painted over.
Yeah.
But I love the fact that, you know, there's a layer of me in there. You know?
Yeah.
There's something nice about that.
I tend to paint over canvases a lot. I do have a few canvases that have like 4 paintings underneath.
Yeah.
Which I should probably, I think I pretty much have documented most of them, but it is interesting to think like, oh yeah, there's like different stages of me all within one
Yeah, if
piece.
those ever get x-rayed, you know.
Right, because you see those like National Geographic and they're like, oh my God, Da Vinci had another thing under here.
There's all these layers in there.
Right.
So, becoming part of the scene in LA, painting, I'm sure that kind of grew your confidence over time.
Yeah.
Like then what did you do with that confidence? Where did you take that?
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, because at first I was very not confident, but I knew it felt good. But also, I think I was a little delusional. And I think you kind of have to be when you're an artist, especially starting out. I think I had this idea that I was a better artist than I was at the time. And I think you kind of have to have a little bit of that to like to propel you forward.
Yeah.
And so even if it didn't look good, I knew I was capable. I was like, I'm gonna get there. So I just got to keep doing more. And so I was actually freelancing for an office, and I remember painting a mural on one of my off days. And they had called me while I was painting to lay me off. They laid my whole team off. And I remember having a spray can in my hand and hanging up the phone and looking at the can like, well, I guess this is what it's gonna be. So I feel like I didn't have a choice, because at that point, I didn't have another option. It was just like, well, I'm going to see where this mural thing takes me, and then I'm just going to go from there.
Yeah.
And so that was in 2013. And I've just been doing this ever since.
Like a good 10 years later. Mm-hmm. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and I feel like that was my first like real office job where I had to like go in and get like a stable paycheck. And I was really liking the stable paycheck because up until that point, like I was basically freelancing for all these clients, and it was nice to know that I would get like a good chunk from one place every 2 weeks. And so I was getting really comfortable, and I remember thinking like, if they wanted to take me full time, like I think I'd probably say yeah. But I was also straddling between this office job, but also like now a growing mural career. Yeah, and so I feel like if they hadn't let me go, I think it would have taken a little longer for me to make that leap.
So it was a blessing in disguise there. I was talking to an artist yesterday, and the idea of an art memoir came up. Kind of like finding artworks from different points of your career, and almost like kind of a memoir or a diary in that sense, like talking about where you were or how you were seeing the world at that time. And just you saying kind of, when you started out, sometimes we are a little bit delusional and we think that we're better than we are, but there is that potential there. And I think there is something beautiful about looking back at an artist's career, looking back at your career and seeing the work that you did probably as a kid, then the work that you did when you started and the work that you're doing now. And, then there's space for the work that you will do in the future. But they're not just artworks that you're creating, they're snapshots of who you are,
right,
as a person, as a creative, as a human, as a a mother, a wife, etc. And I think there's something beautiful in that. And I'd love to, I'm just thinking out loud, like in a way, create a framework for artists where they could be like, okay, here's artwork from early beginnings, first artwork I have. Physically, early life, 20s, 30s, 40s, and have these different chapters as like an art memoir.
I like to say that every piece of art that I do is in some way a self-portrait. It's all a snapshot of who I was at that time, what was influencing me, what was going through my head. A lot of it is what was I listening to, because I realized that a lot of titles end up getting kind of like influenced by the title of whatever song I had just ended on. But yeah, an art memoir, it makes a lot of sense. And
so your work, you've done, galleries, you've exhibitions, but then you've also, kind of delved into brands and that side of things. As an artist, and I can relate to this, that maybe doesn't like to be told what to do or, kind of given briefs in that sense. Like, how have you, found or navigated, working with clients, working with briefs, working with brands, translating your work in that way?
It's such a great question for me at this time, because I actually took an 8-month sabbatical last year because I had a very upsetting client experience for a project that I had been working on for a few years, actually. And usually, because I feel like I have a good sense about who I should and shouldn't work with. And I think that's why it's gotten me this far. But this one kind of blindsided me. It was a very bad experience. And I had noticed that, a lot of what was happening was like them putting words in my mouth for like a PR announcement and like, stuff like that. And so for the most part, I mean, that's going to happen, I think, in general with anyone who ever has to work with a client. Every so often you get a bad experience because in general, the experiences that I do have with brands have been really good. I've been privileged to be able to work with some really amazing ones. And I only choose to work with brands that make sense to me. And I think because that client that I had mentioned, sometimes you got to do stuff for money.
Yeah.
And I have 2 kids and a mortgage, So like I took that one, and knowing that my whole vibe and my ideals were not aligned with their whole brand. And so it ended up clashing in the end. Whereas with most of these other brands I work with, they're brands that I use, like I've worked with Estee Lauder, Jordan, Nike, and these are all brands that I'm happy to align with just because, they are part of I already wear that stuff. I already use these products. Yeah, as long as the message aligns, then I'm happy to do it. And I think for 8 months when I took that sabbatical, I had also romanticized this idea of what an artist is. I was thinking, well, I want to be the type of artist that's showing in institutions, and I want to sell my work directly out of my studio or show in only these kinds of galleries, and I only want to do what I want to do. And I was trying for those 8 months to try to figure out a way to make that work. And yeah, I think I just had a very romanticized idea of what an artist is. At the end of that sabbatical, I realized I'm in a really privileged place to even have to make those kind of decisions, because most artists would dream to work with the brands that I get to work with and do the kind of projects I get to do. When I came out of that sabbatical, I painted the largest mural I had ever done. Actually, it was 75,000 square feet. And then took on a bunch of other brand work. Because it's okay, sure, brand work isn't so bad. That's how we operate as a society now. The artist X brand, that's just kind of what it is, And it's different than, the way art happens, it changes every decade. And these ideals of what a real, quote unquote, real artist does was different 20 years ago, And so I think I was holding on to these ideas of what it should be, rather it really just made me realize I am such in a good place to be able to support myself and my family that maybe doing the brand stuff isn't so bad. And it isn't bad, And
I think we should question where that romanticization comes from of what an artist should be and can do and can't do. And that type of artist in a way is reserved for people who don't need money.
Right.
And in today's society, we have bills, we have mortgages. And if you don't come from a very privileged path where you have a patron or a parent or a family member that can pay for everything, it's an illusion. And I think a lot of us have to see that, art is commerce. Even if you are an institutional artist and you are that type of real artist, quotation marks, your work gets sold, and it gets sold for money, and it's commerce. And I do feel like there is this absurd facade that, if you do this and you do that, it devalues your work. Whereas the real focus should be, well, if you do things that ethically and morally don't align with you, then that's a different story. But if you're an artist that is able to put your work on clothes or cars or walls, these are the museums and the galleries of today. Someone's fridge, someone's foot when they put that sneaker on. You know, that's a gallery, that's a museum. Those are things that we pay attention to, and those are how we exhibit work today. And you can get paid from that. It's always interesting when I meet with artists or people that say, you know, oh, you shouldn't talk about money, you shouldn't do this, that's taboo. And it's like, taboo for who?
Right,
like, taboo
right.
for you. Like, you know, we are artists that are working. You know, we are paying bills and trying to survive and putting our art out there. And I think the more people who create and make, great. Why should it be reserved for select paths, you know?
Yeah. And I had posted something to Threads like a few weeks ago saying, like, you know, I'd rather have a painting of mine in living with someone in their home, some normie, right? Like a normal person versus going into some influential collector's storage unit.
Yeah.
But if that influential collector wants to pay $1 million for my piece, I will help wrap that piece and put it in that storage unit myself.
It could be hidden for the rest of time.
Yeah, just make sure the check clears. But yeah, you know, like it's just that type of art world is really reserved for a small population of people. And I do want my work to be seen by as many people as possible. I mean, I'm not going to speak for everyone, but I feel like that's what most people who are trying to create something want to do. They want as many people to see it as possible.
Yeah.
And, you know, and brands, we talk a lot about, you know, how bad brands are, but I mean, every single person aligns in some way with a brand, whether they like it or not, even if it's their choice to not wear brands, you know, like the decision to curate, you know, what they're going to wear is how they choose to identify and express themselves. So, okay, well, why not?
But galleries and museums are brands too.
Yes.
You know, they brand themselves. They have logos, logo types, you know, brand guidelines. Like they are brands. Yeah. So that said, and, you know, kind of with that focus and mentality, like what are some things you want to do in the future? Who are some people or places you want to have your art in and with and on?
I do want to do more of those large scale, like multimedia experiences and stuff, doing more with like projections, because that work, more than one person has said it was like going to Disneyland because they couldn't tell where the painting ended and the projection began. And I felt like that was the highest compliment, because I remember the last time I was at Disneyland, I went on that new Star Wars ride and I was looking for the projectors. And I was just like, how did they make all of this? And so I want to be able to create more like that. I do have a brand collaboration coming out later this year. And I do like doing those things. That for that collaboration, we're now talking about me doing the creative direction for the campaign, which is something I'm excited about because I do like to be very involved in, because I do like photo shoots for my paintings and stuff. And I actually did a video project recently where I collaborated with a producer and dancers, and I very much loved doing something where I can have my hands on all parts of an experience. So I'm doing more stuff like that, video. I don't know, just going beyond painting. Yeah, doing more stuff like that.
Because I think even going back to your time at UCLA, you know, you were doing communication design. So you have that creative director, designer, graphic designer, like that's a part of your DNA that's in there. And so I love the idea of you coming in and creative directing and kind of from start to finish, having that vision of what it looks like and what it can be.
Right. Yeah, because when I did that homebody experience, that was the first time I really had like the creative director hat on, because not only was it an exhibition, but we put together like a concert series. We turned it into a party every weekend, and so now we're curating the artists that are performing at this thing, which was really cool because a lot of them were people that I was listening to in the studio while I was making that art. And now they're singing live and performing live in front of everyone. So I do like just getting involved. It is interesting that for a show that was centered around what it was like to be isolated. That was the most I've ever collaborated with people. We had like a really big ragtag team. And so I've realized that I very much like collaborating with people and really building on other people's ideas. And I grew up thinking people had me thinking I was a difficult person to work with because I guess I could be bossy. But I'm finding out that's not the case. And really, it's just finding other creatives that complement what you do and then building with that. That's like the best. I get such a high from telling someone an idea and then that person taking that idea and making it bigger than what it was.
Let's go back. You said your husband, he made the ambient music.
For one of the rooms, yeah.
Is he a musician? Does he typically make ambient music?
He makes all sorts of music, actually. He's got like a couple bands he plays with. He actually has a dad band.
Oh, I love that.
He met some dads through our daughter's daycare, and they formed their own band. And he does like rock music and electronic. He's just kind of does a bunch of different stuff. But no, that's just what he does on the side. He works in finance. We needed one person to have a real job in the band.
But I love that he has that kind of, like side creative interest. And I was asking about that because I love the idea that, you have this wealth of paintings and color and, this kind of vivid world.
Mm-hmm.
And then he, kind of has this music side of things. And, those things coming together is like kind of like a Brian Eno generative exhibition work world potentially there where I don't know if you thought about generation for your work or like having it, generate different spheres or levels or layers. But, like for me, ambient music, you can meditate to that with the colors and the worlds that you create, you can meditate to that. So like those two things coming together would be really incredible.
Yeah, that would be really cool. Yeah, that's kind of like the stuff that I was, that my professors were doing when I was at UCLA, like the generative art and along to music and stuff. That's actually, a few of my professors there were also very influential to the digital media type stuff that I do. Because up until I got to college, I didn't realize that art could be that, you know? Did I mention that, me and my husband are high school sweethearts? Yeah.
And you met in the last year,
Yeah, and that was one of the things that we connected on was, because back then we didn't have jobs, we were students. And so, like, I think the first time I like really had eyes for him was I went to one of his shows for his punk band, and I remember seeing him singing and playing guitar, and I was like, oh my God, that's so hot. Because it was like when you see someone that's not only talented but also very passionate about what they do, and you are also passionate about what you do, that's just automatic, like, wow, and we connected on that. So I actually did like the graphics and the logo for like some of his bands, and then I remember like we would be in his garage at his house, and I'd be painting and he would just be jamming on the guitar, and like the music would inspire like the painting, and vice versa, the visuals inspiring him. And so it's not like that's like what we do. And I do kind of like that there's a separation between what I do and what he does. But, every so often we'll come together and, collaborate on some kids. So
I love that. The best kind of work in progress you can have. And so, you have a brand collaboration coming out later in the year. Are there any other project shows coming up? Yeah,
I'm like in a couple group shows. I'm in a show in April at Arts in San Francisco. And then I'm also going to be at Huntington Beach Art Center later this year. I think I'm going to be taking one of those immersive installations from Homebody down. We haven't figured it out yet, but it is going to be one of my media installations. And I'm really excited about that because that show only ran for a month, and I feel like more of the world needs to experience it. Not really anything other than that. I've been kind of working on a new body of work. There have been galleries that have been trying to talk to me, and I'm not trying to ignore anyone. I think I'm just trying to figure out what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
Because my style has changed significantly in the last couple years. So a lot of it is just me jamming in the studio and making new stuff, and then I'm just going to see what happens after that. And
I love that idea of just taking some time for you, just to see where that evolves and grows and turns into.
Yeah.
And so for Homebody, can we see that online?
I do have pictures. Yeah, I mean, if you go to my Instagram, you could definitely check it out there. And it is on my website.
Okay, fantastic. And so in general, what do you think is the point of art?
I think the point of art is to make sense of our human experience. No pun intended. I feel like artists and scientists, they tend to be grouped separately, right? As if art and science aren't related. But I feel like artists make sense of the world in the same way that scientists make sense of the world. They're taking what is given, what they're seeing, and they're running it through a process and using it to come to a conclusion of sorts. So, whether it's an artist using art to process their trauma, or making sense of something that happened in history, or even an abstract painter making sense of what happens when this material meets this material. It's all we're just using that to make sense of what we're experiencing, and then trying to use our findings, our evidence, and presenting it to people in a way.
This has been such a joy. Thank you for coming on today.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I had so much fun.
It's been so nice. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode of What's the Point? Recorded at Spotify Studios in Los Angeles. Check out our website made by eat.studio. Grant Alexander Peters does our theme music, engineering and editing. Research and pre-show preparation are done by Vern Molidor and Joyce Adams-So from the Shantell Martin studio team. If you like this episode, please consider subscribing to the podcast and leaving a nice 5-star review. Don't forget to check out the show description for more information on today's guest. And you can follow myself and the podcast on Instagram at Shantell_Martin. What's the point? He said to me, keep rowing. He said to me, keep knowing. He said to me, keep being. He said to me, keep doing. He said to me, keep reading. He said to me, keep walking. He said to me, keep talking. But why are we talking? But why are you walking? But why are we reading? But why are we knowing? But why are we flowing? But why are we seeing? But why are we reading? But why are we playing? But why are we knowing? I'm knowing because you're knowing, because you are existing in this time, in this infinite amount of time where you exist and I exist, and that is nonsense because no one should exist, because we are all big infinite mistakes in this universe with no place, hurtling through space at 100 miles per place. This is my place, this is your place, this is a place of time as I put my feet on the ground and I put one foot in front of the other. As I put my feet in the ground and I know that you are the other. As I make some noise, as you make some noise, as we make some noise, and we know this is an infinite amount of noise. As we make noise, as you make noise, as the universe makes noise. As I make noise, as you make noise, as the universe makes some noise. As I make noise, as you make noise, as the universe makes some noise.